NGOs some based in the United States, some in other parts of the world, who are trying to help go to the small expense to develop water systems, are there not?
There are hundreds of them, thousands of them. Since I wrote this book called Water, I have been contacted by many of them, and I've been amazed by what is a widespread social movement in the United States and in other countries, in Europe and in Australians even, of people who are trying to bring clean drinking water and sanitary services to virtually every place in the world. We ourselves in this Kenya trip that we took in 2004 were not extraordinary in any sense, and in fact only did a one-off project where many of the people are able to raise just small amounts of money to help people in other regions, or try to help people in other regions.
And since everybody has the same goal in mind, I guess they're all working together, right?
No, absolutely on their own, and it's it could benefit enormously by just coordinating some of the lessons learned and some of the resources, pooling some of the resources. We in fact my wife went to an aggregator of philanthropic money, and we were told, or she was told, that our project was wonderful, and that because we could complete that project by building further pipes from the other wells in the area. But we figured we needed about $80,000, and he said, well, that's just too little money for our big aggregated pools of funds that we operate. That's too small a project that needs to go through the vetting process. So even on our side of the pond, if you will, on the industrialized world side, where the water crisis is a problem but not a tragedy, we are not fully organized to be able to supply the best aid to the rest of the world.
Okay, the water crisis. When we started this interview, that's what we started with. So how do we solve it, and who is the one, or who are the ones who are going to solve it?
By and large, there are two approaches to trying to solve the water crisis. One is to buy time, in the hope that there will be a silver bullet technology that will come along, like desalination or genetically modified crops that use less water. And by and large, most of the countries of the world are pursuing this buying time approach by mining groundwater beyond sustainable levels for irrigation, or they're building, as in China, for example, or India would like to do, large pipelines that bring water from one part of the country where they've got more water to the parts where they have less water, very expensive, difficult projects. The only problem with this approach is that it is depleting the ecosystems, and the silver bullet technologies are unlikely to develop either in enough time or in the proper scale to be able to meet the needs that are out there. The second solution, what we should be doing, is a dual approach. One is we want to improve and enhance the productivity of the existing water that we've already got, using pretty much technologies that are already available, things like reuse, recycling of water, making sure water is being used by the most efficient users, and people are paying the full price for cleaning the water that they use, so that it doesn't go back into the polluted into the ground for users downstream to have to pick up the cost of being able to use it, or just dumped into the seas where it does further ecosystem damage. The second portion of this solution is that we must allocate, for the very first time in world history, water to the ecosystems themselves. That is, environmental flows to maintain the robustness and integrity of the ecosystems that are being degraded. Because if those ecosystems fail, then none of the human users are going to be able to get the benefit of that ecosystem. That means that and we're beginning to see this in places like California and in even parts of the United States or in Australia, where we say that the delta, for example, the California Delta issue, is really a canary in the mine shaft of ecosystem sustainability. The Delta smelt is not important by itself. It is a warning that the ecosystem is in trouble there. The salmon that died in the Klamath River in such large numbers when they turned off the water a few years ago and gave it to the farmers was a sign that that ecosystem was in danger of collapsing. The Great Lakes has a compact that was ratified by Congress in 2008 that will begin to try to clean up some of the water in that region, but the users stakeholders have abided by a compact that will try to manage that water resource in a better way than they have in the past, with the caveat that they won't export the water outside of the Great Lakes Basin. So people are trying, and so that has good aspects to it and bad aspects to it, but the important part is that people are beginning for the first time through law, through government, through judges, et cetera, are beginning to say that water must be allocated to the ecosystem sustainability itself as a primary reason. If you handle that, and then within that framework, you then work to improve the productivity of that water resource. And there are many, many things that we can do. And in fact, one of the little-known facts of the United States history is that for the first 3/4 of the 20th century, we used water water use grew 3 times faster than our population. From 1975 to the current time, water use has actually flatlined or slightly declined, while our population has increased 30% and our GDP has continued to grow. In other words, we've been using that water resources suddenly much more productively. Same thing has happened in Europe, in Australia, Israel, most of the industrial world. So what happened? The main thing that happened was that we passed the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act in that time period. And suddenly, for the first time, those to whom those laws applied had to clean their water. They couldn't just use it and dump it back into the environment in a polluted form. They were responsible there was an environmental cost associated with their water use for the very first time. And naturally, once that occurred, they did what businesses and cities are good at. I mean, we found innovations and ways of using less water, found ways of cleaning it that were more efficient, and made a very large step towards, in fact, improving the productivity of the water. But we've only scratched the surface of what is, in fact, possible. And we know many of the technologies that are possible. Agriculture is not even regulated in the United States, for the most part, under many of the pollutants. The businesses, the corporations are for the very first time starting to do starting to take water use into their balance sheets and starting to account it as an economic cost, which it should be, which it is. They realize their supply chains across the world are endangered if they don't have enough water to carry out the mining, to do the farming, if they're perceived as being competing with local water users for drinking water, as has happened to Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola in India, for example. And their profit bottom line is threatened by that. So little by little, people are beginning to recognize that water has a very important economic value, are beginning to figure out ways to try to measure that value. And once they start to do that, the potential for productivity increases is enormous. My view is that the United States is sitting on actually a golden opportunity because while we have many water problems in our country, we are one of the water richest countries in the world. We have 8% of the world's water, 4% of the world's population, and we have a temperate climate, which makes the water much easier to manage than it is in a monsoonal one. And we have an opportunity to produce many of the goods and the food, the water-intensive goods and water-intensive food that the water-thirsty world is going to be desperately needing. That will enhance our growth, our national growth. It will give us international leverage in the world because people need food and many of the goods that you can produce, and can help relaunch this country's international status while doing good for lots of parts of humanity. It's a win-win-win if we undertake to reform our own water markets.